Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are on episode 17. Good. Hello to Jamie. Glad you are here with us.
Hi, glad to be here. I can't believe 17.
I
Lucky
know
17.
we are rocking and rolling, man.
Here we
And
are.
today we are going to be talking about why addictive substances are part of our tree of life. We have a tree of life with several branches. Some branches are smaller, some branches are larger, and those may change in your life as time goes on. But we wanted to include part of recovery, one of the foundational elements of addictive substances and why that matters to us. One of the things that we know is we all have reward pathways in our brain. And when we start in with addictive substances, what happens in the brain is through repeated exposure, they become down regulated. Or, in other words, it takes more to get the same high. For me, a row of Girl Scout cookies could totally have been a single serving where someone who just had never eaten
Totally.
sugar would been satiated. So that's what happens to us. The problem with that is when you have an addiction, it organizes your day around regulating the pleasure pain response. And
Yes.
so through that, you're not able to be your true authentic selves when you're deep in the addiction. You're unable to serve both places, your authentic self as well as the addiction.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, the addiction usually wins. And so it robs us from enjoying the everyday pleasures of life, which means our life gets smaller, much
Totally.
smaller. It locks us into this small life versus when we're not bound by the bonds of addiction, we have this big, full, beautiful, rich life with people in it and hobbies and interests and
Yeah.
things that are just a lot of fun. And we're able to derive natural pleasures from those activities. So that's why we added it. So what are the things that we talk about? What are the addictive substances that we
Yeah.
consider on our list? Actually, Jamie, do you want to share what the
Sure.
list is?
Yeah, Paige. So this is a really important topic. And, we actually, the phrase, these two words, addictive substances, we're very careful with those words because they are substances. They're not foods. They're not treats. They're not must-haves. They're substances. And
Mm-hmm.
when you think about the word substance addiction, the list is quite long, actually. So there's the classics like nicotine. That's an addictive substance. Alcohol, addictive. Recreational drugs, marijuana, things like that are considered addictive. Caffeine actually is an addictive substance, is in
Mm-hmm.
that same class.
Mhm.
Prescription drugs, as we know, certainly the opioid crisis, for example, is an example of an addictive prescription drug. Then we also added some things that you might not automatically think of for addiction, which is sugar, white flour, or really flour of any kind. And the reason that we say both of those things is sugar in its form is highly processed and powdered, as is flour in its form, highly processed and powdered, just like cocaine, heroin, and a lot of the drugs that are out there, illegal or recreational, that are out there. They are powdered as well, and they're highly addictive because of the way they hit their bloodstream. Okay, so we're adding to this list now sweeteners and artificial and plant-based sweeteners as well. So
Mhm.
all of you monk fruit or stevia lovers, I don't
Mhm.
care if it's stevia leaf, it's an addictive substance
That was
because
me.
and me too. Well, me too. And we'll talk about why that is, right? We'll talk about what qualifies it as an addictive substance in a moment, scientifically. But we're going to add to this list high fructose corn syrup, an
Mhm.
addictive substance.
Mhm.
Substance. It's not a food, guys. Not a food.
No.
Preservatives found in food.
Yeah.
Monosodium glutamate, also an addictive substance. Food dyes, colorings, these are addictive substances
Right.
because our bodies don't know how to break them down or what to do with them naturally. So they have a response to the body to actually protect it. And in order for us, we feel worse. So we eat more of this stuff to feel better,
Right.
which is actually worse for us.
Yeah.
And because our tolerance level goes up, that's what increases the addiction. We need more to feel okay
Mhm.
which is actually worse for us. And
Yeah.
that's why they're an addictive substance.
Yeah, it's the pleasure pain balance that's just on fire. You know, so we talk a lot about why are these dangerous, that
Mhm.
we're overreacting. It's this is too much, that these things aren't that bad. Well, I am reading a book called Dopamine Nation. Have you heard of that?
I have. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Anna Lemke,
Yeah.
she's amazing.
Yeah. So she tells a story about, in these labs, they study a lot of rats, and they had this free rat running around, and there was another caged rat inside like a plastic bottle so the rat
Yeah.
could see it. He instinctively went to try and help free his
Mhm.
friend, but then they also allowed him to self-administer heroin in his surroundings, which he did. And once he consumed the heroin, he was no longer interested in helping his brother free
Yeah.
himself. It was that, I mean, I got chills on my arms when I read that. That's how powerful. You lose the connection with people. You don't care. It's not possible to do both things at the same time. So that's why it's so dangerous. Luckily for me, my religion encourages abstinence from tobacco, caffeine, alcohol, and of course, drugs. And I can tell stories about friends that they drink pots of coffee or tea all day
Oh
long.
yeah.
I knew a guy who drank tea from the minute he got up till the minute he went to bed, and the only time he stopped was when he had to go to the bathroom. So I just want to say, buddy, here's a drink of water. Try it, slow it down. But it's the same story that people that live off of coffee or excess alcohol, we've known those people, and we know that addiction is progressive. So it's just going to continually take more and more for the same effect. I have had a few close relationships of people that have struggled with drugs. It runs in families, it destroys relationships. I've seen lives just completely fall apart through drugs. My son, interestingly, he had a roofing and remodeling business, and he had this employee that I just loved. I usually would end up getting to know his employees, and
Sure.
he was the sweetest guy, sober, hard worker, soft spoken, lovely to be around. But unfortunately, he had a substance abuse problem,
Mhm.
and he would come to work faithfully for this stretch, and then he would go on a bender, and he wouldn't be to work on Monday for sure, and maybe half a day on Tuesday, and he would just get back into that vicious cycle. He just could not break out of it. But I loved this man. He When he would get in his habits, he would tend to be abusive with his girlfriend.
Mhm.
And so she called the police one evening, and they came. And as they came into the house, he was walking out of the bedroom. They might have beckoned him to come out. And as he was walking out of the bedroom, he had a knife in his hand, and they shot him immediately and killed him. And that devastated me because this was such a valuable life. He
Mhm.
just could not break free of the drug addiction. It
Mhm.
was a noose around his neck, but it just crushed
Absolutely.
me. And I have family members who have had deaths as results of drugs, and I have family members who are active in recovery and continue to fight the fight every day. The ones that have lived to
Yes.
be my age, they are all in some type of active recovery program, but they all have tragic stories to tell. The ones that live have the tragic stories to tell. So that's why they're dangerous.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, um, when you're in it, you don't know it. This
I
gentleman we
agree.
talked about, this person who had these cycles, right? These cycles of
Yes.
the in life and out of life and in life and out
Hmm.
of life. You
Yep.
know, I did not have an addiction to alcohol. I did not have an addiction to substances, other than food, other than processed foods, right? So the substances on our list, I did have addiction to the last half of them. But they weren't illegal drugs or prescription drugs or alcohol. But my addiction showed up just like this man you're talking about. I would go in life and out of life, in life, out of life.
Hmm.
And when I was out of life, it was a true, as they say in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I
Hmm.
I would show up as one person one day. Um, or for a stretch of days. And then I would have this dark place that I would go to. I did not connect it to the fact that I just had a binge, but I would have
Mm,
this place that I went to that I couldn't really understand why I was there. And I wasn't myself. And I wouldn't return phone calls, and I wouldn't engage with life, and I wouldn't engage with people I loved, and people were in my life had to sort of come find me or try to pull me out of wherever I was. And it wasn't like I was anywhere. It wasn't like I was in, a crack house. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like I was off, on a bender, but I had been on a food bender, and I was not myself anymore.
right.
So I totally, in a way, I see how it can happen, and I see the parallels with processed food,
Oh,
my
sure.
processed food addiction. And that's why I'm so passionate about educating people, because
Right.
it does show up just like any other substance addiction. It
Yeah.
does make your life. I lost jobs, I lost a marriage, I lost major relationships, I damaged relationships with
Mm-hmm.
with people that I will, to my knowledge anyway, I don't think I'll ever have a chance to repair. And
Mm-hmm.
my heart hurts when I think of the loss that I've had of the people that I love because of the addiction
Yeah.
and the cycle that I was in, of self-harm and other harm and other neglect, that I deeply hurt people that I truly care about and love. Even a couple of them, children that I would give my, a limb to see again,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
to connect with again, and to apologize to. I don't see that I'll have that opportunity, but God is good. Maybe I will someday.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that I have to live knowing that I had these cycles, and that I
Mm-hmm.
hurt those people, um, it's heavy. It's heavy. And I've spent most of my life in addiction in some way, shape, or form. I was smoking as a kid, as a teen, in college. I, was, and of course I was thinking I could control my weight with it, which is hilarious because I was already, obese, and I was adding cigarettes to it. It was delusional. I was killing myself two different ways. And
Mm-hmm.
alcoholism does run on both sides of my family. And as I said to you, Paige, before, I could have easily been an alcoholic, easily. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that food was more acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 3, it's more acceptable to go face first into a cake than it is to,
Mm-hmm.
pour yourself a
Mm-hmm.
Manhattan. So the food was there for me. It was encouraged. It was socially acceptable. And I know I have an addictive personality. As they say in recovery, I have all the isms, right? I've done them. I unfortunately am, my mindset to this day, I have to be very aware of it. I have a mindset of fear. I have a mindset of what ifs, and oh my gosh, and I'm going to try to control this or that, or because I can't trust that God or the universe will take care of me. It's this instinctive mindset that I have to be very aware of, so that I can overcome it and choose differently every day, because my default setting is lack sometimes and fear sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, much less now than years ago, but it's still there. And it is leftover of a childhood of trauma and abuse and neglect. And when I think about, my addictive personality, I'm very careful. Even caffeine, it's on our list of addictive substances for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot, moderate caffeine. It's something very hard for me to moderate. And I will have it 2 to 3 times a year when we're having long drives. We drive from Texas to New Jersey and back. I will have a cup of black coffee on the road if I'm for my driving day, to make sure that I'm awake. It's, to me, it's the good, better, best, right?
Yeah.
What's the worst? The chemical energy drinks. Those are the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Better, a cup of black coffee. Not
Yeah.
ideal, but it gets the job done. So I have an addictive brain. I have the isms. I have to be careful with these substances.
Yeah. I agree. I think we've done a really good job of explaining why this is not an overreaction to something that some people may say, it's not that bad. So, we've talked a lot about drugs during this time and relating them to food as well. And so the question always becomes, is the treatment the same? And interestingly, I had a person close to me go to rehab recently, and we had a conversation when they got home a month later. it was fascinating how the inpatient rehab was doing exactly what we do in food recovery. Why? Because it's located in the same part of the brain. It all operates the exact same. So the approach is the same. Um, we have to be careful with the addiction transference from drugs to food. That is very common. I
Mhm.
was talking with a cousin of mine recently who was in town at a drug not rehab, but like a convention for people that have
Right.
gotten off drugs. I don't know the exact name of it,
Yeah.
but a convention.
Mhm.
Yeah, for people in recovery. And he was commenting about how much weight he had gained and all the weight that most of the people in the drug recovery program because of addiction transference. So have to be very careful of that. But with food, unless you go back to drugs, there's really no place to go.
They
But
had taken their addiction to fermented sugar and transferred it to
that's
straight up
right.
sugar.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm. So awareness. What about
Yes.
you?
Super common, super. I've seen it all the time.
Mhm.
And guys, I want to be clear. Paige and I aren't sitting here in our lofty ivory tower judging everyone. We lived this life. We lived the pain. We lived the addiction. We lived the cycle, the shame, the blame, the self-judgment, the self, in my case, self-hatred and self-harm. We lived it. We understand it. We are not here by any means to judge or point a finger because we know full well we have three pointing back at us. So it is from our perspective an attempt to educate and an attempt to help you identify to what we've gone through in our addiction recovery. But when I was first in recovery, I knew that I learned that I was a food alcoholic, right? And I began to
Mm.
identify strongly with the AA world because I had a
Mhm.
lot of not now, I did not realize I had a lot of alcoholism on both sides of the family, but I did realize that alcoholics were a lot like me and I was a lot like them. Even though, like I said, my drug of choice, so to speak, as if I had a choice, my drug of choice was not alcohol, but I saw these longtime alcoholics in recovery, these men and women who would travel the circuit, they call it,
Yep.
speaking to different alcoholics in recovery. They were, even though they were very strongly about principles and not personalities, these people, these men and women still were lauded. They were very highly regarded in the community of recovery there. And I remember, you don't find them on camera, rarely, because these are usually closed meetings or speaker meetings. And of course, it's the whole anonymous thing, right? You don't want to
Mhm.
see them on camera. It makes sense. I happened to see one of the men who I followed for a long time and just thought he was so wise. And I happened to see him on camera once, a video of him speaking. And I was shocked. He could not move. He was immobile because of obesity.
Mm.
And I remember just my heart broke for him because I realized that here was this wise man changing so many lives. And here he was modeling his other addiction,
Mhm.
modeling it. And
Right.
he was saying, like, look at me. I'm recovering, right? Never recovered, but I'm healthy, but he obviously was still abusing food. And it was so sad.
Yeah.
And I see it now I'm in a lot of the 12-step meeting rooms for different times of my week. And I will be in a room that follows an AA meeting and they'll be, they have the birthdays, right? And that's a wonderful
Yeah.
celebration of life and they bring in processed food.
Yeah.
And the first thing I do when I walk into that room to host a meeting is I will clear out the food. And if there's already members in that room, I will get a lot of pushback when I clear that room of food. And I just look at them and say, guys, I wouldn't walk in with a bottle of vodka to your meeting and
Yeah.
expect to sit there while I drank it.
Mhm.
And they were just like, well, you got a point. So,
Mhm.
usually they get it, but it's real. It's real.
It's
So,
gut wrenching. It's gut wrenching to see it, and you just want to scoop everybody up and say, "Come with me. I've got a way I can get you out of this."
and
Which
you know what, they can too. They can too. They're just not seeing it yet.
I agree. I agree. It's just they don't know how, they don't know the way, they don't understand it. And quite frankly, I'm sure some people think, well, this is just how it is. I don't know anything else to do other than accept this is just my lot. But we're here
Exactly.
to tell you that is not your lot.
Not your lot.
Which you always wonder about how do people get into this? how did this happen? I remember hearing a story about this girl, and she started her story by saying, I was on the bathroom floor in a train station alone, and I never knew this would be my rock bottom. I never knew when I took that first hit of, I don't
Yeah.
even remember what it was,
Right.
that this is not what I envisioned my life turning into, homeless on the bathroom floor of some public train station, just totally alone, just literally lifeless and wishing she would die. And that's not the glamorous picture that when people start that they think this is where it's going to end up. I think people start with maybe peer pressure or curiosity, but no one imagines I'm going to try this one time and it's going to totally rob me of my life. And then people start using it to fill a need, and then it keeps going.
Yep.
You'd experience that thrill. It's just, yeah, I wish there was a bigger warning label.
Oh, absolutely. And the stories that we see in the media, right? Real stories
Yeah,
in the media,
yeah,
stories that we hear, like you talked about in your social circle and my social and family circles. It still doesn't, I've lost family members that I love and care about to addiction, and or to the lifestyle of addiction.
right.
And it's so sad. And I look at it as what leading, when I think about what led me to this, I've talked about this before, Paige, there I was, was wearing this, smaller size, and I'd done this whole big transformation physically. And I thought I was, such a model of success, weight loss success.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
standing behind, backstage at the Steve Harvey show, waiting to go on.
mhm.
And, I think they even had me busting through a picture of me from
Oh
before.
gosh,
It was one of those,
I need to get that clip.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's out there. It's out there. But it is actually was a great it was a great interview. He's a wonderful man. So it's no knock on Mr. Harvey, but it was more like I'm standing backstage thinking I've arrived. And
Mhm.
I remember thinking, why am I so empty? This
Yeah,
isn't I thought this would be it, and I'm still so empty. It's because I still had a God-sized hole in my soul.
yeah.
I thought that looking a certain way after years of not looking that way, or being received for being pretty or acceptable in society. I thought that would be the answer. And
Mhm,
it wasn't. I was still so empty. And,
mhm.
it was a result of years of trauma, years of childhood, abuse. And I don't just, I'm not talking about physical abuse only. I'm talking about emotional and social, and psychological abuse that is
Mhm.
like 1,000 little cuts over the
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
It's not big stuff. I did not, I was not put into a foster home, or my parents weren't taken away from me for that reason. But they were distant for a myriad of other reasons. And had a parent in prison, and things that modeled for me chaos, and
Right.
modeled for me lack of trust in God. And the family of origin modeled unforgiveness, and modeled fear. And so
Yeah,
those are the lessons that I learned. And when you're constantly grasping at straws, and you don't have a higher power, as it were, you don't have a belief in something greater than yourself, not because you think you're that great, but because it's not taught to you in a meaningful way. It
mhm.
was it was taught in a very surface way, but it wasn't meaningful, and it wasn't something I internalized. So sure enough, I grew up and I'm grasping at straws.
Right. As you were telling your story, I was thinking, well, these are habits that started from your earliest memories.
Absolutely.
So what else would you expect?
Exactly.
Where else could you have possibly gone
It
but continue?
it could have been no other way. And that's what my recovery has taught me. There was no other way for me to turn out the way I did.
Yeah,
And it's not
yeah,
it's not to point a finger at anyone. It is my family of origin and the generations before me.
yeah.
There was no way I could have been any different.
The cards were stacked.
Exactly.
Cards were stacked. And so, what do people do when they're in situations where they can't say no, that they're weak to it, and they're in a situation and they're being offered it? I heard someone telling a story earlier today in a meeting about how they were with friends who were drinking this weekend, and she did end up drinking, and she was telling me about it today, and she said, I'm going to have to get new friends. I can't go back and do that.
But
And I feel better coming and just saying out loud, I did drink. It's not like a confessional. She just wanted to tell somebody about that. And she said, I've even thought that I'm going to have to go back and tell these friends, I just can't do that anymore. So, that leads into the point of just trying not to put yourself in a position to say no, first of all.
yeah,
That's, I'm a scaredy cat. I don't want to be set up for that. So controlling your environment, seeking
yeah,
out help. If it's bigger than you are, and it is bigger than most of us, there's plenty of support groups out there and lots of people that want to help. It's a very common concern, and hopefully knowing that this is a common concern helps. And it's just like you and I were just now saying, it's not your fault with food. It's not your fault. You had no idea when you were developing this addiction as a child. So it is not your fault,
no, not
but
at all.
we're not victims. And part of Jamie and I mission is to help educate and free people from this dark place.
It's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to recover.
Right.
It's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to teach ourselves differently and to do
Hmm.
differently and to model differently for others, especially if we're parents or influence younger children or younger generations. It is absolutely our responsibility. So, we're not victims,
Right.
but I also want to be very clear that I believe that we do have a responsibility to recover and to be
Hmm.
contributing members of society and to,
Right.
to leave life better than we found it,
Hmm.
better than it was given to us.
Hmm. I heard someone talking earlier. I think I've mentioned this before about he wants to write his obituary and then just work backwards from there
Oh, I love
in
it.
life. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you
Begin
want
with
on
the
your
end in
tombs?
mind.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well,
Anything.
yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to add one thing about what do I do if I can't say no?
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big believer in changing your environment. And I don't mean now in the recovery world, there's this whole idea of, they call it pulling a geographic, right? Is to literally move to a different
Right.
city.
Hmm.
Wherever you go, there you are. By the way, that doesn't work.
Yep.
I've tried it, by the way. It doesn't work. Trust me, it doesn't work. But it really, when I say change your environment, I mean walk out of the room, get outside and go for a walk. Change your thought environment, change your mental environment, call a friend, get out to a meeting, go watch a silly movie that doesn't have a lot of cues in it. Remind yourself that you're here for a reason. Like, if I
Yeah.
got news for you guys, if we're here on this planet, there's a reason we're here.
Yeah.
God is pretty good at organizing this this kind of thing, and we're still here. There's a reason we're still here. And
Hmm.
finding your purpose while you're here, I think, is one of the most rewarding and I believe critical parts of life. And some would say carrying the message of the spiritual deliverance message is also why we're here.
Connection. We're here for
Exactly.
connection.
Exactly. And it's connecting, inspiring, lifting each other up. That's why I have the 3 Ps: purpose, posse, and prayer. Right. So for me, those are my 3 Ps. I have a strong purpose. I have a posse that I cultivate, and they might be posses in different areas of the country and online and in the real world. And then prayer is something that I do for others, for connection. I do it, for my own connection to self and my connection to God as I understand him. And that is, they help. Those 3 things always help me say no.
Beautiful. There's a lot, we get some pushback when we talk about marijuana because it is legal in a lot of places now. So, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
And
What's
isn't
the deal?
marijuana,
Who cares?
isn't it safe? And it's prescribed to cancer patients, for Pete's sake. So buzz off, get off my back. So first of all, is as someone who has a food addiction, and quite frankly, 80% of the people do, if not more. So
Mhm.
it's an appetite stimulant. Secondly, it's not considered as safe as it used to be. Studies
Yes.
have shown that the THC level in marijuana has risen to 24% from 1975 to 2017. There was a study on more than 14,000 people 50 and older and found that the higher doses of THC were associated with a higher incidence of thinking and perception issues, not the good kind, as
Mhm.
well as dizziness. So it ain't that great.
No, nope, absolutely not. And when I think about, the studies on marijuana, we know that it degrades brain cells. We know it leads to overeating. We know it leads to loss of judgment and loss of inhibition. And I was just looking up this word just to be sure that I pronounced it right, because it is something that it scares the daylights out of me. It's the whole the fentanyl
Oh my
crisis.
gosh. Oh, it's
We
huge.
guys, I don't know about you, maybe I watch too much, Law and Order, but I don't I don't know what these recreational and street drugs are laced with anymore. And I don't
Oh
care
yeah.
what kind of dispensary you're buying your illegal or legal substances from. You don't know. You don't know. It's not like there's a government regulation across the board that you can read about that is safe. And frankly, the government regulates our food supply, and we know that
Yeah.
that's designed to make us fat, sick, and nearly dead. So why
Hmm.
would we think that any government regulation of legalized drugs or recreational drugs would be any better to advocate for our health?
Hmm.
This idea that we are, in a world that the government will protect us with when it comes to food substances or drug substances. um I understand that it's comforting to think that, but we have to be our own best advocates. And to me, if I'm buying a recreational drug from a dispensary or from anyone or using a recreational drug of any kind, I'm not my own best advocate. I'm just not.
Yeah. No, a great point to end on with that topic. And some believe that this addiction is a disease, and other believe that it's a choice. I definitely think it's a disease. I think you may be predisposed to not know it. So when you experiment, then all of a sudden you're hooked. Choices are involved, of course, in the solution. And by that I mean, you can my husband can eat one cookie and be fine and not one another. So he's not predisposed like
Yeah.
I am. It doesn't have the same effects as on me, but I have to make choices to fight my way out of this. He has an entire cupboard I don't go in that is filled with all kinds of cookies and stash and stuff. And those will stay in there past the expiration
Oh
date
yeah. Oh yeah.
because he is unaffected, so he
Uh-huh.
does not fight the same disease, but he likes his caffeine, and I could care less about caffeine, so it's just our drug of choice, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And my husband is the same way as yours, by the way. And it's so funny because, when I did come into the house and had them move the stuff to a different cabinet, the stuff kept expiring and going bad and getting mold, the stuff that could get moldy got moldy. PS, most of the stuff that's in there can't get moldy because it's so highly processed.
Right,
But
right.
it got, super, super stale and inedible. And it got to the point where, he didn't really care about it. But I do agree, Paige, addiction in my book is a disease.
Yeah.
P.S. I have the disease. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not pointing a finger being like, oh, those diseased addicts. Nope, I'm one of you. I'm right there. I've got it. And in the reason that I say it's a disease, it's because it is not a normal state in the body. It is not, it is when something outside of you or inside of you in a dysfunctional way is controlling you.
Mhm,
It is not a normal state of the body.
mhm.
Is not finding balance. It's out
Mm,
of balance.
that good point.
So when we
Mhm.
think of, of something that is the symptom of disease, not only are we out of balance, but it is progressive. It gets worse
Yes,
over time, just
yes,
like
yes.
diabetics go from, gee, I got to take, my diabetes medication and I have to, maybe inject insulin a couple times a week. Fast forward a few years,
Yeah,
being assessed for issues
a
related to blindness and
yeah,
possible
amputation.
amputations and
Mhm,
wounds that won't heal and I mean, they are progressive diseases.
mhm. Right. So which is a good segue into how do we get out of this? Can you recover on your own, or do you need a
Yeah. What do you
recovery
think?
group? So you and I like this topic because you and I are a little bit different. I have a smaller bucket than you do as far as connection needs, and it is possible to do it on your own. So first of all, that I totally believe you can do it on your own. Plenty of people have just they say they quit and that's it. But it sure seems like it's a lot easier and more enjoyable to link together.
Right.
I maybe need less connection with others than you do. You are very social,
Mhm.
very a great personality. People like to be with you and around you, and you enjoy people. So what do you have to say about recovering on
Um,
your own?
Yes, thank you. I agree. I don't. It's so funny because I don't think of you as not a social person at all. I think of you as someone that people love to be around, and I love to be around. But I never think of you as not having those same needs. There are some people that I think, they have maybe a small tribe and they really like that, they have a very small amount of people. And as long as they're connecting with those people every day, they're fine. I'm the kind of person that I do have those very close people, maybe two or three that are very close to me,
Mhm.
but my circle is larger in the sense, not because I need it, but because it's just kind of, I don't know, I guess just how I'm wired. I appreciate having people in my life, a community around me. For me, my addiction got incrementally worse every time I was alone. Isolation is an indication that I'm in my addiction again. If I'm tempted to isolate or stay home, it's usually because there's something, food or something at home,
Mhm.
right? If I'm tempted to stay home and I have no physical symptoms or no, maybe like need for sleep, need for rest, need for just rejuvenation, then there's probably food at the other end of that equation.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I used to think I could do it on my own. But for me, in the long term, I realized that my own sick thinking and behavior got me to the bottom that I bounced along for years. And if I'm relying on that same brain to get me out of that, it's not going to happen, right? I'm going to get
Smart.
back to where I got before. So I need, more than any other person of the world, I need God first, right?
Mhm.
And then I like to surround myself or be part of communities with inspirational folks. I'm very selective about the people that I spend time with. Have a lot of friends in recovery, and that's very, very intentional. Um,
Mhm.
because they model for me something that I want. They model for
Yeah.
me, they have something I want.
Right. Smart. Smart. We've talked a lot about the emotional strains of substance abuse, but there's also a physical toll that it takes on our
Yeah.
bodies too. I've never been on caffeine, but I know people go through major withdrawals with
Mm,
that, the same as with sugar. During
mm,
COVID, they had to keep the alcohol stores open because of DTs from
yeah,
withdrawals from people with alcoholics. It was
yep,
too dangerous to cut people off immediately. So
yep,
we're talking about liver disease, lung cancer, heart disease, vitamin deficiencies, even brain damage and birth defects. So there's a lot that
absolutely.
plays into that.
Yes, absolutely. Substances we're talking about today, especially in combination, right? If you have,
Good point.
caffeine and sugar
Mhm.
or nicotine
Mhm.
and alcohol, they can
Mhm.
turn on genetic markers for major
Yes.
diseases. So they say genetics load the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger. I believe that wholly,
Yeah.
wholly, I believe that.
Mhm.
We see the genetic markers being turned on for dementia, cancers, many different cancers, diabetes, kidney and liver disease. These substances are just not worth messing with, because what they can do is, it's Russian roulette. You never know when that genetic
Yeah.
marker is going to flip over, and
Yep.
you're going to go from I can have it once in a while to I can't live without it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So let's finish up talking about this before we get to some listener questions. We've got
Yeah,
four great listener questions.
yeah.
If you have an addiction, anyone that's listening, please listen to this section. If you have an addiction, what's the first step? How do I get out of this? And our message to you is make sure you're ready, find a support group, learn how to cope with stress and reduce the cues and triggers around you. We know this is an addiction of cues and triggers. Get
Yes.
educated, listen to our podcast. When it comes to caffeine, slowly reducing helps. If it's alcohol, you need to seek professional help to make sure you're safe. But we
Mhm.
have a lot of answers for you with when it comes to food. What do you want to add on to that, Jamie, for people who are trying to find a way out?
When Paige and I started this podcast, guys, we were very, very intentional about the words we chose to represent our message. And we chose real food recovery because we had more than just a message about weight loss. We had more than just a message about, stay away from sugar. We had more than
Mm.
just a message about, get off the processed food. Our message was really about recovery. And that's why we're here talking about all these addictive substances. The media, the media industry, the food industry, and alcohol industries, they all sell fear and confusion.
Yes.
Just like big tobacco sold us back in the 60s and 70s when we were onto them with the cancer. They started to sell confusion. They started to put out, and guys, this is happening. This has been happening for decades, by the way, in the food industry. How many of us are thinking of those People magazine, or I guess it was Time magazine, or some of the major medical journals that have, these big announcements about butter is back and eggs are safe. And for instance, I'm not going against eggs. I'm just saying, guys, they have these big proclamations because people
Right.
are like, wait a second, I thought butter clogs our arteries and we die. Sugar's a killer, sugar's safe. Like,
Yeah.
there's these articles are everywhere. The media is very
Mhm.
intentional about confusing us. They sell
Mhm.
confusion. They're not selling you products.
Mhm.
They're selling you confusion. And it's very intentional. They want us to question data. They want us to question science and be so confused about what direction is right. My direction is to stay away from mainstream anything if I can. Meaning, whatever is mainstream about media and confusion, whatever is mainstream about the major food industries, of course, the alcohol industry, those things take me away. The confusion takes me away
Yeah.
from my spiritual connection.
From peace. Yep.
The substances take me away from my spiritual connection,
Mhm.
and to take me away from my energy, my focus, my mental clarity, my
Mhm.
peace, serenity, my connection. It's just nothing I want to mess with.
I agree. Good point to end on. Great message. So as we kind of segue between our listener questions, we do want to bring up one more point that we know drugs have a big impact on the noggin. We've talked about the impacts on the brain. So what are some other things that you can do to protect your brain? There's no miracle brain pill for brain health, though one
Mhm.
of the most important things you can do is keep your weight stable. That may be a shocker to some, but that was important because we're here talking about food addiction recovery. We wanted to bring that up. A 2021 meta-analysis of data found that being significantly overweight increased the risk of dementia. Surprisingly, however, being underweight was also a risk factor. Turns out you can be too thin if not too rich. Plus, getting extra exercise is important to cut your risk. And just so you know, our next
Mhm.
episode 18 will be on the role of nutrition in the aging brain. And we really want to drive home the point that what we do today is what shows up in our older years. It's too late. Once you're in the older years, you can't start then.
That's right.
So what we're talking about, it's never too early to start taking good care of your brain health. So
Yes.
with that, we've got a few minutes. I want to do quickly these 4 questions. The first one is, do I have to be off all addictive substances in order to recover from food addiction, or can I still have caffeine and drink? Well, we know it's tough. Alcohol takes your resistance down and it slows your metabolism. Caffeine can be problematic because of the fat and the sugar added to it. Basically, they're both triggers for eating poorly. Coffee can cause the body to crave sugary drinks or sweets. Do you want to add anything to that, Jamie?
Uh, no, I think that really covers it. For me, caffeine was really toxic in large amounts. And it got to the point where I would need more and more to feel the same effects.
Hmm.
And so for me, it was either at first it was a vehicle for fat and sugar.
Right.
And then when I pulled the fat and sugar out, it was just something that I needed for my workouts, right? I thought,
Hmm.
that's what I said, I needed for my
Hmm.
workouts. And then I needed more and more over time to get the same effect. By the time that COVID hit and I no longer took the caffeine in the morning before my workout, I detoxed off of it for the first time in many years. I was so there was a solid week of major detox symptoms, major
Wow.
pain, major neurological
Wow.
things, major mood and depression and anxiety and all kinds of swings and all kinds of physical issues, pain and inflammation and liver. And I could feel the side of the body where my liver is. All of that was totally just aching.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah, that's how much I had done with the caffeine and didn't even think that I had done anything with it.
So there's our statement, folks. That's our answer. Don't do
Yeah.
that.
Don't do it.
So I'm worried about my kids picking up this food addiction too. How can I keep them from being affected by my issues? How do I protect them from processed food addiction? Example,
Yes.
keep a clean home, fix clean meals, talk about it, educate,
Yeah.
lead by example. It's their journey, but do not pressure your kids. Just
No.
keep talking in a non-judgmental way and walking the walk, living the
That's
lifestyle.
right. That's right. Yep, I agree. And you know what? It's their journey. They're going to be exposed to it everywhere. They're going to have to find their own path, guys. It's just the same. It's the same thing about an alcoholic. An alcoholic never quits because their family member wants them to quit. They quit when they find the reason. So it's really
I agree.
important to just let your children model for them. That's the best thing you can do. Don't restrict it or don't make it vilified in the home, but educate them on this is what love looks like. I love
Yeah.
you so that I'm not giving you this
Mhm.
processed foods. I love you.
Mhm.
So I'm not gonna, even though you're 18 years old, I'm not gonna, and you're at home for the night and I'm gonna buy you booze because that's what a cool parent does.
I know.
That's not what a cool parent does. That's what
Right.
an enabling parent does.
Yep. Yep.
So we want to be really careful about being honest with ourselves about what love really looks like for our
Yeah.
kids
Mhm.
and what modeling we can do along those lines.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I love my nightly glass of wine. A little bit of vino is good for my heart, right? Well, maybe not. Several organizations, such as the Mayo Clinic, still endorse the idea, but the American Heart Association doesn't recommend drinking from any form of alcohol to gain health benefits. Research is beginning to coalesce around the idea that light or moderate drinking may not help to prevent heart disease so much so that the World Heart Federation declared in 2022 that no level of alcohol
Yeah.
is safe for your heart health.
Yeah.
Agree completely. It's a gateway to progressive disease, progressive addiction. I strongly do not believe
Yes.
in any amount of any addictive substances being okay.
Agreed. There are some major influences in the wellness and well-being world. I mean, I'm talking highly credentialed authors and speakers and personalities that will advocate for a glass of wine at night. And I just think, why are you saying this? There's so many other ways to get the polyphenols. There's so many other ways to get, why does it have to be wine? Why can't you advocate for a handful of red grapes? Why can't you advocate?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, why does it, it just tells me that there's relaxation. There's a ritual that happens for that person. There's a relaxation
Mhm.
ritual. There's a perspective that they have to have this thing to relax, or it's a punctuation mark for their day. I get it, but those to me are all signs of something that you're using outside of you to alter your state. And
Beautiful.
that's addiction.
You said that very, very well. Last one that I wanted to make sure to get in there. I have the occasional cigarette. Does that really matter? Yes, it does. A review of 141 studies showed that people who smoke just one cigarette a day still have half the heart disease risk of people who smoke 20. That was a
Absolutely.
shocking statistic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is shocking. It is shocking. Paige, before we close, I just want to just one little caveat. You said earlier that we have an upcoming episode for the role of nutrition on the aging brain. It's not episode 18 yet, guys. So it's not our next episode, but in the future, in the near future, we will have an episode on the role of nutrition on the aging brain. So stay tuned for it. Look for it. It'll be labeled as such, but I just didn't want to falsely advertise to anyone inadvertently. So
Oops,
it's
my
coming.
bad.
That's
My
okay.
bad.
It's coming. It's coming. Our episode 18 is all about stress management. which is the other side to the addiction coin. If your stress pathways are activated, your addiction is ready to strike. So we have to talk about stress pathways next.
Good job, Jamie. Keep me in line. I need a keeper.
Back at you, sister. Thanks again for a
Thanks.
great conversation.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Take care.